sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things which I dare not confess to my own soul. God keep me, if only for the sake of those dear to me. From Dracula. The biography of Bram Stoker. Although other authors have written mediocre horror novels during his time, Bram Stoker has had the greatest influence on Gothic and modern literature. Because his novel Dracula was deemed a great classic horror novel, he was stated as one better than others in the supernatural field, and his work has transcended decades. Bram Stoker was born on November 8, 1847, into a family of 9. His hometown, Clontarf, is a coastal suburb on the north side of Dublin. He was one of 7 children. All of whom were baptized in the Church of Ireland. His father, Abraham Stoker, worked as a civil servant at the Dublin Castle. And his mother, Charlotte Matilda Blake Thornley Stoker, stayed at home to care for her 7 children. Little is known about his early life. It is shrouded in mystery. Most biographers have had to rely on public records to determine the interests and life of the author. Since they know so little about Stoker, most biographers would do anything to receive more information about his life. Stoker was bedridden from birth to age 7 with an unidentified illness. This sparked his interest in the supernatural and the occult, which would later be the reasoning behind his fictitious novels. I was naturally thoughtful, and the leisure of long illness gave opportunity for many thoughts which were fruitful according to their kind in later years. His fascination with the supernatural and the occult could have been the driving factor in the horrific aspects of his stories.
Stoker attended Trinity College in Dublin from 1864 until 1870. He was an accomplished student and sportsman, graduating with honors. He specifically won awards in science, mathematics, oratory, history, and composition. Stoker served as president of the Philosophical Society. He was also known for his impeccable skills in soccer and marathon walking. After graduating college, he entered the Irish Civil Service, where he served as inspector of petty sessions. Not long after, he was hired as a civil servant at the Dublin Castle, home to British royals in Ireland from the 1800s to the early 1920s. Stoker's father had also worked as a civil servant at the castle and helped his son land the position. Stoker served there for nearly 10 years in the chief secretary's office. In the evenings, he worked as an unpaid writer for a local newspaper, the Dublin Evening Mail, later the Evening Mail, penning reviews for various theatrical productions in the city of Dublin. Theater critics were typically held in low esteem at the time, but Stoker attracted notice for the quality of his reviews. This jump-started his writing career and soon led to his success. Then, in 1876, Stoker gave a favorable review of Sir Henry Irving's Hamlet. Irving invited Stoker to dinner, and soon after they became lifelong friends. Due to Irving's influence, Stoker obtained a management position at Lyceum Theatre in London West End. He was both acting manager and business manager for 27 years. This is also where Stoker became involved in London's high society, where he met James Abbott, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and Hall Caine, who Dracula was later dedicated to. Bram Stoker married Florence Balcombe, a celebrated beauty and former suitor to Oscar Wilde. Together they had a son, Irving Noel Thornley Stoker, born 1879. But there has been much speculation about the Stokers' family dynamic, some of which suggests that the marriage was loveless. Working with one of the most popular actors and managing one of the most successful theaters made Stoker a notably busy man. This left little time for him to spend with his family. Stoker published 19 novels and many more short stories in his lifetime. Stoker's first novel, The Primrose Path, was published in 1875 as a melodrama about the evils of drinking. His other works include The Mystery of the Sea, The Jewel of 7 Stars, The Lair of the White Worm, Miss Betty, and many more. Although Bram Stoker received praise for his novel Dracula, None of his other works gained the same notoriety.
Stoker wrote his most famous piece, Dracula, in 1997. It was successful when first published, but has grown more so over the past centuries. Stoker wrote extensively about Romania and its vampire history, and made numerous visits to the British Museum to study maps and collect data for the novel. Stoker was inspired by the novel Carmilla, Penny Dreadful Vampire, and Vlad the Impaler, which is where he found the name for his vampire. In the first drafts, Dracula was called The Dead Undead, starring the vampire Count Vampire. Stoker took widely held beliefs and ideas about vampires and blended them together into a hideous whole. Dracula was influenced by aristocrats of the time and their xenophobia, or fear of foreign people. It was believed that those who are different, for example those who are excommunicated children who were baptized, witches, and magicians could all become vampires. Prophecies were scattered in and around cemeteries in the belief that the rising vampires would be compelled to stop and count them. Hence, Count from the vampire from Sesame Street. Stoker's most popular novel changed people's view of vampires from being horrific fiends to being sexual creatures. By making the vampire suave and sexy, Stoker started a modern fascination with all things vampire. Count Dracula is able to appear as human, this indistinct contrast to the corpse-like and physically monstrous vampires of the Eastern European legend. Stoker manipulated traditional vampire powers to create an interesting and dynamic character. Bram Stoker's Dracula has inspired a plethora of other works in theater, literature, and film. More than 200 movies have featured Dracula as a major character. Works such as Nosferatu and the 1931 and 1992 Dracula films were based off of Bram Stoker's original novel, Dracula. Other characters similar to Dracula can be found in Blade and Vampira. Today, the vampire is a common character, portrayed as the villain, the hero, and the anti-hero. Vampires in modern media vastly differ from Dracula, but without Stoker's novel, none of them would have had the basis of their amazing characters. Though his name may not be familiar to kids with modern Patterson posters on their wall, they have Stoker to thank for bringing the modern vampire to life. Stoker's original vampires is reflected in stories as Twilight, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Stoker continued writing throughout his life and until his death. In 1905, Stoker's good friend and co-worker Henry Irving died, which marked the end of Stoker's management of the Lyceum Theater. Stoker and Irving's 30-long-year friendship in the theater inspired Stoker in many aspects of his writing career, and although he suffered a stroke in 1906, Stoker continued writing. A biography of Irving was the first book he wrote after his stroke. On April 20th, 1912, Bram Stoker died in London, England. At the time, it was believed that Stoker died from exhaustion, but with advances in modern medicine, doctors believe the cause to be syphilis. Although other authors, such as Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein, have created writings that were able to capture the public's attention, Bram Stoker wrote one of the most beloved horror novels of all time, changing Gothic literature and the idea of the classic monster forever. Stoker's Dracula has received praise from both critics of his own time and modern-day scholars. There have been many 20th century novelists who have dealt with the vampire, but none so strikingly as Stoker. Local and international readers alike have enjoyed Stoker's Dracula. It has been translated into 29 languages worldwide and adapted into every artistic medium. Although Dracula is considered a horror novel, Stoker's use of prose and symbolism in his books makes it a must-read. You could even say a requirement. Stoker has long remained one of the least-known authors of one of the best-known books ever written.